Okay. So I was talking about the sign of progress. And if you could just correlate it with today's world, then you will be finding out some other things which have been definitely added in this sign of progress. Right. Okay. Now, you know, yes, this is the point which I was talking. So that doesn't mean that before industrialization, industrial revolution, there was no production. No doubt there was production, but that is the community production, right? Or the commodity production, right? It was not in a huge or the large scale production, right? So even before factories began, I see. Actually, it has been begun in the European countries, right? Particularly in the Europe, right? And uh, very first you can consider that is in the England. That is the reason purposefully I have put these two words. Right? Instead that if I could only put Europe, it could have been more than enough. Fine. So there was a large scale industrialization or industrial production, right? And which was being used for international market. So produced at that particular place, being distributed all across the globe, right? And it has become the international market. So this particular era of industrialization or that particular phase of industrialization, which was known, this is a typographical mistake, KNOWN, known as proto-industrialization. So it is called the proto-industrialization. So this was the phase of proto-industrialization. So you can consider the phase of proto-industrialization and how in this phase the producers, merchants, and the customers are correlated, right? Or they have close association with with each other, particularly the merchants and the producers. That we have to see in this particular point. Now, what happened because of proto-industrialization? So you can just see prior to proto-industrialization, suppose I am a farmer. So I was farming whatever may be my farm, and I was just looking for the dependency of my own family. So I never thought about uh, selling the goods in a market, right? Or thinking about more and more production. So probably I thought I require so x, let's say some x amount. So I was just thinking to produce x amount, right? Rather, the same farm could have yielded multiple times of the x which is required. But obviously, if you want to have more yield, then you need to have more labors, right? Probably your family members would be associating with you on your farm. Fine. So that is what the very first thing. आणि काय होतं की मग जेव्हा एकटाच शेतात काम करायचा तो माणूस, सो ऑब्विसली इन्कम विल बी श्रिंक डाऊन, राईट? म्हणजे शेतीचं उत्पन्न हे साधारणपणे असं गृहीत करा की दरडोई उत्पन्न 2 लाख रुपये इतकं म्हणजे क्षमता आहे आणि तुम्हाला लागणार 50,000 रुपये, तर तुम्ही फक्त तेवढाच विचार करणार आणि जर तेवढंच प्रोडक्शन करणार, सो ऑब्विसली युअर इन्कम इज ऑलवेज श्रिंक्ड. But because of this proto-industrialization phase, right, it has supplemented the income. It has raised the income, right? And obviously that was completely from the cultivation, right? See, I'm seeing before starting factories, right? So later on the factories, see, when the steam engine had come, steam engine येईपर्यंत लोकांना the people were not believing in the factories, right? मुळात एक तर ती टेक्नॉलॉजी वापरणं अवघड होतं, त्याची विअर अँड टिअर झाले तर त्याचे रिपेअरिंग करणं प्रचंड कॉस्टली होतं, राईट? सो दीज वर द डिफरंट थिंग्स. पण स्टील यू कॅन हॅव, रादर यू कुड हॅव large scale production, and that was from the cultivation, that was from the farming, and therefore the problem of shrinking income had solved to a certain sort. Fine. And because of this has allowed the farmers or the workers to the fuller use of their family as a labor resources. पहिले घरातून एकच जण शेती करायचा. Now, because of this proto-industrialization, right? Because of the raise or gain in the income, now everyone from the family started work, right? And therefore, labor resources have been increased. So, fuller use of the family members, right? And obviously, that is the reason how the cultivation must have increased, right? Or why the cultivation increased. Now, in close relationship, or there was development of the close relationship between the merchants, right, and these producers. But this is not only the relationship between merchants and the only producers, rather that was a relationship between the countryside and the town. So obviously खेड्यापाड्यात कुठेही पिकवलेलं बाजारपेठ तर शहरामध्येच आहे maximum. So that was not only the business between the merchants and the producers. Rather, this has actually developed a relation between town and the countryside. Right. So, though the most of the merchants were living in the towns, right, but most work was being done in the countryside. Right. So obviously, या दोघांच्या मध्ये आणखी you can just consider the communication, the transport. So these are the some of the other things you need to consider in the background. Right? असं नाही की फक्त directly there was only the merchant and the countryside. No. So you can have some other things which are always being involved in this. Therefore, this particular phase called proto-industrialization, it was a system. It was a part of the network of commercial exchanges, right? So as I said, there is transport, there is communication, right? Or altogether, this formed network of commercial exchanges, right? No doubt, there had been exchanges prior to this particular phase, but they were not commercial. Right? म्हणून तुम्ही कदाचित ऐकलं असेल काही जुन्या लोकांकडनं की पहिले आम्ही एखादी गोष्ट दिली तर त्याच्या बदल्यात दुसरी एखादी गोष्ट घ्यायचो, right? But later on, obviously, with the advancement, these things have been changed, right? And then here you can have the controlled control of the merchants, right? So this production was no doubt controlled by the merchants, right? Goods were produced by the producers, particularly called, you can call now laborers, right? Along with their families, right, at their own farm, but not in factories, right? But not in factories. So if you consider the first factory, right? So earliest factory, which was started by 1730, right? But that was, you can just say one or two. And the number of factories, right, in the multiple actually started in the late of 18th century, right? So at the end of 18th century, you could have come across n number of factories, though it was started in 1730, right? Okay. So the most dynamic industries in Britain were the cotton and metals. Okay, very first thing I will tell you, as far as the first industry is concerned, so it was related to the cotton, right? You know, very first thing that was happened is related to the field of cotton. So what had happened in this, before starting its industrial production, very less amount of cotton was being used. Still it was in the decades of metric ton, right? Later on it was raised to around 1700 to 1800 metric tons. So you can just think tens of metric tons could have gone to 1800 to 1700 tons. That means what? it must have imported cotton from all the part of the world, and this had been happened, right? So there had been a great revolution, or you can consider the great production as far as the cotton is concerned. Later on, people come across steel, right? So next industry after cotton, that was the steel industry. In fact, where the metals are being used, right? And because of this, now you can consider the dynamic industry was clearly cotton and metals. Fine. So later on, people started using different things made of steel, right? Or you can consider metals. But as I said, there had been in new industries or new developments through let's say development or establishment of industries, right? So you can consider the uh, replacement of traditional, right? Replacement of traditional things, right? And now you can consider so new industries could not easily displaced. In fact, I think it was replaced traditional industries. So what these traditional industries you can consider at this moment? So these traditional industries were nothing but the production which is actually being done at the farm, right? So now next question comes in that why the new industries haven't replaced the traditional industries. Fine. So because of the large portion was not produced within the factories but within the domestic units. Though we are looking into industrialization, but the early phase of industrialization was not producing large number of goods, or production was from the factory, rather it was still from the domestic units. So it's expensive, and the merchants were not able to cope up with it because its wear and tear was uh, bringing huge loss, right? So this is what, as far as the introduction of the industrialization is concerned. So here you can consider the proto-industrialization. So simply one thing you need to understand, right? Okay, towards the end assignment. So your today's assignment is you need to write down era and incidents or the events happen in the ancient history. For example, the first conference for Buddhism, right? So where it had been happened, and what was the year, right? And what is the name? So likewise, right? So which had happened at Kashmir. Fine. So year, place, and what is it? Likewise, for example, uh, in some say 100 BC or likewise. Fine. So you can know what you should know what has been happened in that particular year. Right? So not complete, but half of the ancient history you should write today. Right? You just try, and if you could not get it tomorrow, I will tell you. Right? So at least to Jainism and Buddhism, you can write down these things. Fine. Up to Jainism and Buddhism. Fine. Okay. So anybody wants to ask something? Okay, that's in from my side.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I will be leaving this meeting so that your next.
Join on new ID which sent on your WhatsApp group. For the English lecture, join through new ID which sent on your WhatsApp group. Join for English lecture through your new ID.